All right. Yeah. Well, hello, Teresa. Hello, Chinzia. We are very, Chinzia. Sorry, Loretta. I was just reading the names. Yeah, it's super good to have y'all today for the workshop. So today's going to be a little bit more of a guided session. We're going to be walking through all the materials that are going to be needed to submit to the super exciting upcoming Elevate program. We're going to actually be able to do a few more custom questions since we have such a small crowd. So that will be very exciting. But yeah, we'll basically just do a guided walkthrough. I'll stream my screen once we get to the point where we're going to be sharing the documents and going through the individual points. But first of all, I wanted to do really quick intros of the wonderful Code Coven and Wings team members that we have here. Starting with me, my name is Zeggy, and I am a producer at Code Coven. And yeah, I've been super excited to get into the Elevate program and get ready to kick it off this upcoming fall. So yeah, Harry, I'll go and toss it over to you.
Hi guys. So I'm Harry. I'm one of the instructors here at Code Coven. Hopefully contributing to the Elevate program. We don't actually know who's teaching it yet. Might be me, might be someone else. But I am an indie dev. I'm a lecturer at university in game engine. So I've been making games for a while now, but yeah, work at Code Coven mainly just helping people make games, which is my favorite thing to do. So I'm happy to be here and talk to you about that.
All right. Yeah, Eliana, we'll go ahead and kick it off over to you.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you, Harry. So yes, I'm Eliana. I'm the COO for Wings, where I have the absolute pleasure to be supporting marginalized game developers by investing in their games. I'm also the COO of a game cluster in Sweden that's called Game Habitat, where basically we work together with the local industry and the local government to make sure that we create the best supporting environment for game development. So I'm here. I'm very happy to be here with Code Coven and Wings team. Just excited to meet the people that are interested in the program and then like to provide some support to Harry that I imagine is not going to be needed. But if you have any questions regarding the games industry in Sweden or Wings in general, then I'm here. Thank you so much. And then I guess I can pass to my teammate, Krista.
Hello, my name is Krista, and I also work with Wings. I do kind of communications and community management and a little bit of dev relations stuff for Wings, which is very awesome and very exciting. And I'm so excited to be here with you all today to talk about this program. Yeah, and aside from Wings, I'm also an artist and I have my own business, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. So I guess we can continue on.
All right, excellent. Then the first thing that we can go ahead and jump right into is the actual two documents that we'll be reviewing today. The first one that we'll be reviewing is a pitch deck, which is going to be a little bit about the context of your game, your team, an overview of everything that is, basically what you're applying as. And so that's going to be important. What we're going to be going through is a template. Obviously, you can do your own custom slides, but we want to make sure that all the information that should be on there is definitely on there. And we'll be walking through that to make sure that you're the most successful when you are submitting the application. And then after that, we're going to go into a little bit more of a technical doc. It's going to be a budgeting doc. It's going to help you break down the different, budgeting needs that your team's going to have. And, we're going to, assist you in being able to come across as, both realistic, but also, abiding to like a good scope in the program, especially for, the length of the program and making sure that it fits in, what we would hope to come out of a game from that. So with that all being said, I'll go ahead and stream my screen. The one that we're going to go ahead and start with is the pitch deck. All right, team. Perfect. All right, and can everyone see that? Excellent. All right, sounds good. So I think first slide should be relatively straightforward. It's going to be the intro slide. So this is going to be like, the kind of first intro. So it's going to be, a game logo, any sort of key art that you have, any sort of, platform that you're going to be working with. And so that's all going to be, on the first slide. Yeah, I mean, obviously we want to keep the questions coming in and rolling as we are going through this, but Harry, do you have any advice for this first slide?
Yeah, I mean, generally, like obviously this is the first time we'll see any of your stuff. And obviously we'll be looking through the entire thing, but I think it's always like a good practice to assume that this is your opportunity to like catch people. So really you just want like something interesting to look at on here, right? It's the cover sheet, right? It's the cover of the book. We want to see what it is, some really cool looking thing, and then just like the most high level information about it. But yeah, beyond that, just make it look nice. It's really like what I would say about slide number 1 anyway. Yeah.
Perfect. So yeah, I'm not sure that there's too much to cover on that slide, so we can go
Yeah,
ahead and roll on to the next one.
Quite self-explanatory, that one, yeah.
All right. Then this next one is going to be the pitch. So it's going to be pitching your mobile game in 1 sentence. And so this is going to be an elevator pitch. So if we only looked at the slide, we would have a pretty in-depth understanding of your game. And elevator pitches are obviously very important because again, it's going to be it's going to be the first thing that's introducing us to our game. But yeah, would you have some advice about how to make a good elevator pitch?
Yeah. So I mean, I'm sure we're all familiar with where elevator pitch the term comes from. Sometimes it's called executive summary. But for those of you who aren't, it's based on a hypothetical situation. If you worked for a company and you got stuck in the elevator with the person in charge, and you just had the length of the elevator to tell them your idea. So it's still useful context, but basically what we want to see is like a concise, but also exciting explanation of what the game idea is. So we want to avoid overly technical or overly specific language at this point. You're really trying to sell it at this point. So keep it sexy, as some people say, like use words to really sell it. Yeah, make use of imagery. In some ways, it's an extension of the first page. We're still kind of at the point where you want to build excitement for this thing. Yeah, so not too wordy, not too technical, interesting, like salesman like language is probably what I'd go for here. But there's like myriad advice on how to do elevator pitches, probably better than mine. But seeing as we'll probably be looking at someone, that's kind of what I look for. It's like, do I get excited by this? If you can distill what your game is about, so that's probably maybe distilling the core loop, which I think there are slides on. But if you can distill the core loop or the kind of key themes or actions or premise of your game into something really short and concise, but also interesting, that's the job. It sounds quite tricky, right? But what is ultimately not a lot of content, like it's going to be a couple of sentences at most. It's actually a lot of refinement normally goes into making a good elevator pitch. But yeah, keep a high level, keep it interesting. I don't know if anyone would want to add anything to that.
All right. Yeah, no, looks like we already got some great advice coming in for keeping it short. So yeah, just like I'll go ahead and keep this slide short. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. So for this next one, it's going to be a pretty, a pretty simple overview of the team. The main thing that we want to make sure about this slide is that everybody that's going to be included in the project is able to, have a way of presenting themselves. And we love to see the faces that are actually behind these programs. We love to see the people that are actually making these programs. And, you're more than welcome to do any sort of introduction that, feel is fitting for you and represents you best. But we absolutely want to make sure that we have, a photo or an illustration, your preferred name for the course, as well as your pronouns and the role that you will be on the team, as well as, any other additional flavor text, as you would say, to be able to really showcase showcase your best self. Yeah, is there anything that you'd really add there?
Just that I think so. Obviously, we're all about supporting marginalized developers, so we want to see everybody on here, right? It's also the place where we'll look for like gaps in skills. So you kind of want to make sure that you have like roughly each role filled. Now, in smaller dev teams, roles are a lot more fluid than like in a bigger game studio, right? So you may have people doing lots of things. So it's totally fine to like put designer slash audio person, right? Or even if some people are like programmer slash artist, right? It's generally fine. But you just want to make sure that kind of like every facet of making a game is kind of covered in the roles that you describe on here. And then that's evidenced as well. So whatever kind of information that you append to each individual team member's stuff kind of demonstrates, or at least at a glance, you think, okay, well, if this is true, then they should be able to do this job well enough. So again, not need to be too wordy or whatever, but it can just be examples of projects they've worked on, or how long they've been doing something, or a link to a portfolio like Tegi's mentioned. But yeah, again, it's really it's kind of like this one's really about, I think, just us being able to see that you've got a team and you've got everything covered, and that we believe, at least if all the stuff was on here was true, that the people listed could do the jobs. I think that's what I think about this slide. I don't know, it's not really like right or wrong answers. Yes, Loretta.
So I think one of the limitations of this particular grant giving round, I guess, is that the team has to have experience making games together. They have to have worked together before. So how is it on these slides that you can demonstrate that? And my second question is related to the first, in that you have to know each other beforehand and have worked together. My team doesn't have a sound person, and I thought I was going to make it up by putting a bit in the budget to hire a sound person to compose the music and compose the sounds. Is that a valid way of filling in the skills gap, so to speak?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so with all due respect to audio people, I think that probably is one of the roles that can be most easily kind of outsourced. So I definitely think that's fine. I don't think you necessarily lose anything by not having a dedicated sound person. I think if you're allocating funds to deal with that, that's good too. In terms of showing evidence of collaboration, it could either be, you could either just point out that people have worked on the same projects, or if you've have experience of collaboration but not necessarily with each other, that's a reasonable substitute. So just evidence that they've worked in a team before, they've worked on a game project before. That can be game jams, it doesn't necessarily have to be released stuff. But it's, yeah, I think the ideal is like evidence of collaboration together. But if you don't necessarily have that, which is not necessarily like a bad thing, a good substitute for that would be evidence of collaboration in general. And again, that doesn't have to be on release titles, it can be on game jams or other smaller projects. Yeah, that would be how I would look at it anyway. I know we've got two Wings people here, they might want to add to that, I don't know.
Yeah, I can add to that as well. I was just trying to read what Cynthia said, that the experience of working on the specific prototype you are pitching is also sufficient. Yes, yeah. Exactly. I was going to also say that, like, when we say like working together is mainly because we wanted to make sure that people could understand that in this program, in this acceleration program, we're not trying to like matchmake. We're not trying to get individuals to apply as themselves with their specific discipline and then try to matchmake them into make a project together. But rather we are looking for projects that already exist, even if they are still in the early stage. So it's more like if you're already working on the prototype together, that is already a team, right? And that's what we are looking for. And as Harry put very well before, like some roles is kind of fine if you have on your plan of the development of the game is to collaborate with the freelancers or artists, like be it at the music or even a concept art. So it's not that everyone has to have worked with together, but since for this application, we're also looking for some vertical slice of prototype, we would expect that you already worked with part of the people that you're applying with.
Awesome. Perfect. And then one little last bit of information that I'll also be able to share here is, you know, for the teams that we want for Elevate, we definitely want people that are, you know, we want teams that are led by people of marginalized genders. But the other thing is, if you're able to add a little comment or some sort of demonstration that when you are seeking funding, to provide funding to a contractor, for example, for audio work or for possibly any other gaps you're looking to fill, if you're able to, provide a statement of good faith of, we're also looking to outsource this to someone who is of a marginalized gender, or who, to a person that is going to be, who's also in a marginalized position. That's something that will also give you those extra, that extra boost to your application for sure.
Awesome.
Then we can go
Hi,
ahead.
sorry.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, hi, can I just ask a question quickly?
Of course.
So I'm a solo developer, and I'm building a prototype. Is that sort of frowned upon? How that's viewed?
Sorry, Teresa, you cut out for a moment there. Could you repeat that one? Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a solo developer, and I was just curious as to how that's viewed. I don't have it, but I can hire out people to do certain tasks. I mean, I'm working with an artist to help with some of the artwork, and I do have access to sound designers and voice actors, but it's not sort of a fully fledged team. We haven't necessarily worked together for an X period of time. I think for me, this is sort of the tricky part. I'm trying to understand, like, I guess, the balance of access. If you could just kind of help me.
Yeah, so I think the way I would look at this is really what a lot of this information is kind of conducive to is to instilling confidence in the project. So if you're already successfully working as a solo developer, you've already got a lot of skills that cover kind of a range of development, and you're supporting yourself through make use of contractors to do certain jobs. If you've got evidence of doing that and currently doing that well, I think it's a reasonable substitute for having an established team. I don't want to jump the gun. I'm not sure if that's an official. I don't think is it an official policy that you need a team, or solo devs are okay? Is that right, Ziggy?
So it is not 100%. We will decline your application if you are a solo developer. But I also do know that part of this project is definitely backed by Wings, who is strongly supporting of the implementation of teams that are a little bit more than solo developers. So I did want to go ahead and maybe toss it over to Eliana or Krista to maybe add a little bit of advice or some feedback here.
Yeah, no, I can add. No, actually, at Wings, we do have a lot of solo women developers. So I think I just second everything that Harry said. I think for the program itself, we were just thinking, like, what is the ideal number of, size of a team that could make the most of the program, in a sense. And then we got to that number, like between like 2 and 5. But that doesn't exclude, and I think we also wrote that on the information, that doesn't exclude teams that are a little bit bigger than 5, and of course, solo devs. For the solo devs, is exactly what Harry said. I mean, we're just looking for like your like competence. Like if you are, you have a lot of experience and work by yourself and have some other projects they've done before, like that is probably like enough. It's just that we are looking for, make sure that all the competencies are covered, but we do know the solo devs, they do everything, so that's good. And if you're hiring external, just make sure, like, just to mention like the plans and of them, and as Zaggy mentioned as well before, like who is the person that we kind of like also interested to know how is the composition, the final composition of your team would be looking like. In terms of the teams, I'm just going to add, I know there's an error case, but I'm just going to add for the sake of after this is recorded, so after this is shared. So for teams that are actually bigger than 5, our only concern was regarding the SPEN. So it's just like to make sure that in the budget that is like the salaries and all the costs, they're still within the SPEN. So it doesn't mean that we won't consider, but we're just gonna maybe want to know more about the explanation on the budget side, how you were planning, salaries and the distribution, and perhaps you also like supporting through another fund. So that are definitely like special cases. So we're just going to be looking into that.
Great, thank you.
Krista, do you want to add anything? Did I miss anything?
No, that sounds great.
Cool. Well, speaking as someone who's like often relied on contractors to fill like gaps in my like 2-man team, it's definitely not necessarily a bad thing. It's just you need to have strong evidence that you know how to do most of the game yourself and you know exactly where to go to get the gaps filled. I think if you always compare it to that, okay, does this instill confidence? Does the information I show instill confidence that this project can be achieved? Then that's sufficient. Yeah, that's what I would always compare it to.
Another quick question. So I might not necessarily have an extensive experience in game development. I am working on a prototype and can do a build for this this initiative. I think my background is in software development, so I don't know if that's if
I'm
not
a programmer,
having.
so I think that's good.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Thank you.
No worries. If you need to, if you're looking for like specific feedback on like the fidelity of something and like, oh, is this of a certain fidelity to kind of get it over the line, then I personally am always happy to like answer those kind of queries. So
I do appreciate that. I will, if you don't mind sharing your email.
yeah, I'll drop it in the chat. No worries.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Perfect. Then yeah, let's go ahead and just keep on moving with the slides. I'm glad that was a great conversation come from that one. The next thing that we're going to be quickly going over is the key features of the project and what are the 3 things that will make your mobile game stand out. So when it comes to the core features, Harry, I know you've been doing a lot of talking, but would you have some advice about some strong features that would really stand out? What sorts of things kind of pop out in these things?
So I suppose features isn't necessarily to be confused with design pillars. They're slightly different things. I think when we're looking at what the features are, it's like, okay, what kind of things are in this mobile game? What do you do? How does it work? How is it structured? Those things can all be considered features in some degree. It's quite a nebulous term. In terms of what features stand out, for me personally, I love to see the game ideas. If the context is mobile games, then games that can really only be made on mobile, so things that make use of the platform itself in interesting ways. So creativity and novelty with regards to the interface are always stuff that stands out to me. In general, there are more generic kind of things that make features stand out. So if you have a really good like art style and you want to show that off, go ahead. If you have an interesting concept for the story, this is probably the place to put it as well. You're really trying to think about the parts of your game concept that are the most novel or the most engaging. So, saying your game has a combat system as a feature would not really be particularly interesting to me. But if the combat system has some like unique and radical way in which it does the combat, then going into detail about that would be more interesting, right? I think I love games that make use of the gyro in a phone. So to give an example from a recent Code Coven program, we had a game that was about clearing up a lake that had been like polluted, and you had like a little magnet fishing hook. And the way you controlled the game was with using the gyro of the phone as the hook went down through the lake, and you would like rotate the phone to kind of get the hook out of the way of things on the way down. And I think that's a perfect example of like a novel feature, well, that's probably not novel to be honest about mobile games that are out there, but certainly a creative feature that makes use of like the mobile platform specifically. Yeah, that's kind of what I look for in these things, but it is somewhat subjective. So I don't know if others want to add to that.
I think the main thing that I would just add to that is, this is a great place to really express a bit of personality, both for your team and for your project. This is definitely one of those more freeform sorts of answers. And obviously, we want to have a little bit more of a logistical understanding of what you're actually trying to develop. That's very, very important. But the other thing that this is going to be really good for is, really expressing that personality about, what this project is, why you're, so excited about it, and kind of, giving it that unique twist to make it, showcase it as your own project. So.
Yeah, actually, just kind of reminded me, like, this doesn't necessarily have to be like mechanics or stuff that's happening in the game. There could be interesting aspects or features of the game concept that kind of go beyond it a little bit. You know, maybe there's some interesting like community plans. Maybe it's got like a specific reason for existing that has some sort of social impact. You can put those down as features as well. So it doesn't necessarily have to be all within the kind of game prototype.
Yeah, exactly. I was just gonna add to that as well. Like sometimes it's also like a very distinguished art style or something like this. Is also just feel free to add here. So yeah, if it's like a social impact or something like that, then you would write, I guess, about it. But if it's something they can share visually as well, like I think this is a good place to add, you know, your gifts, even if it's still like white boxing. You know, and then as well, like some concept art, you know, it's like basically just showcasing, you know, the level like that you want to achieve, because of course it's a prototype, so you might not have all that. So just feel free to drop some files down.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Actually, even though these slide decks are like ones that aren't delivered in person, you know, so when you deliver a slide deck in person, you want to kind of avoid text because you're delivering a thing. And even though we are going to be reading them on a screen, that rule still kind of applies a little bit. So where you can use imagery to substitute words, generally better, but do use enough words to explain things. Don't just want a slide deck full of GIFs. Although if you could pull that off, that would be awesome.
Awesome, perfect. Then I think we're good to move on with our time to the core loop. So what is the core player experiencing? What will the player be doing? I think this is Harry's wheelhouse, so I'll just go and toss it over right away.
Let me get my old game design degree out. What does it say here? What's a core loop? So a core loop is hopefully something that you'll kind of have heard before, at least. It's normally a list of verbs which describe the things that you do in the kind of main bit of the game. So it's normally just like 2 or 3 actions. I mean, it depends on the scope, but I imagine in a mobile game, it's not going to be many more than that. And just a couple of verbs that normally like literally in a loop that describe the repeated actions that you take throughout the game. And it can actually be really hard to get it right. Kind of distilling what your game idea is into a core loop takes practice. But there's loads and loads of resources online about how to make a good core loop and how to refine a good core loop. But essentially what this will be is just like a little image with a couple of verbs on it, looped around with perhaps some kind of detail about each verb around it. Generally though, the more concise, the better. So I think the core loop for super hot, which I think just came to my mind because I looked at it recently, is literally just move and shoot. That is so for those who don't know, super hot is the game where weird isometric style, and when you move, time moves forward, and when you stop, it doesn't. So you basically kind of John Wick through the game. But the core loop for that is move and shoot, and that's it. So if I was trying to sell super hot, I'd put that in, and a very concise, very small core loop like that is immediately eye-catching because it's like, wow, they've got such an elegant games design that they've been able to kind of distill it into that. So yeah, hope that made sense.
Perfect. All right. Well, I think, you know, if there's no questions, we can just keep on moving right along. All right. So this one's a fun slide. This one is, you know, a little bit more context about the people behind the team and also the reason for the team. So why are you making this game? So what does the game mean to the team? Why is right now the right time to be making this game? And how is this game different from other mobile games and other genres? It seems like you're excited to already give some input, Harry, so I'll go ahead and toss it over to you. Oh no, you're muted.
I was just okay, so I wasn't actually excited. I was just humming. I was just unmuted and like humming along with what you were saying. Apologies if I came across excited. That's the last thing I want. So really, in my view, this is about proving that the game like kind of deserves to exist. So you probably want to do a little bit of market research, think about like what competitors are out there. You may also want to define what success looks like for you. Wings might have to elaborate. I'm not sure, like, necessarily, like, if everything has to be like ultra commercial, we will sell 1 million copies of this game, or whether success is about having some other sort of impact, which is just as valid. So you want to talk about why you want to make this project, what that success looks like, why you think it's possible. So you evidence that by looking at similar things, or by talking about any gaps that you've found that exist. And going from there, really, it's just justifying why this game should exist, either on your own terms or evidenced additionally with some kind of market research too. This is sort of like going out of my domain a little bit, because sometimes I just say I'm just the programmer. So I don't know if Wings people want to add to that one, but yeah.
Yeah, no, like just to add, like I think when you, just to clarify when Harry said like the gaps that exist is like gaps in the market. For instance, like maybe you always wondering, like you play games and you always wondering why there's not a game that does this with this, and then it's like that would be awesome. Or like why there is not a game for this specific target audience. I think from Wing's side, I mean, the reason why Elevate exists and as well as Wings is that we want to widen the audience. Like we want to make sure that we have more diverse creators to ensure that actually games are made for a wide range of audience, right? So a lot of times, diverse creators, they might feel that there is not games that are made for them, or games are not targeting them. And it might be because there is not enough representation on the people actually making games. I mean, we are often like creation of our environment, and sometimes we live in our own bubble and we just want to make cool things. Everyone want to make cool things, but then we're making through our own experience, and then sometimes that makes us not seem like perhaps or not related too much to other people who have a different experience, right? So I think, as Harry said, like we are not necessarily targeting with this project specific with Elevate like commercial titles, and we just want to see more interesting and cool projects from diverse creators out there in the mobile markets for this 23 edition. And obviously, as part of the program, we're going to have a session that, as a training, the cohort's going to pitch to both Netflix, which are our sponsors for this program, and to Wings. But that doesn't actually mean that as that pitch is for like training and we're going to give feedback, or of course throughout the program we might be talking a little bit more about what Wings specifically look for when the games that we found, and then Netflix might be able to also share the same. But this is like disconnected. Like we don't necessarily gonna be looking at a selection of the people in the program with already the intention of funding as like Netflix and Wings. We just want to make sure that the teams get support and get the opportunity to pitch either to us or to other publishers and other investors. So it's not really a necessary focus just. So I think it's good for you to have in mind, like you don't need to make a page actually targeting Wings and Netflix. I mean, that's not the goal. Is pitch targeting publishers and investors in general, I would say.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah, well, super appreciate the insights. And I do want to pay respect to our time, so we'll probably blaze through the last two slides so we have time for the funding sheet. But yeah, no, super love the insight. Then yeah, the next slide that we have right here is current progress and production timeline. So you want to consider all the different stages of what production is. So this is considering where you're actually at with your project is a good thing to specify during this entire slide, as well as the model for your game. So is the game live service, and what post-launch support are you going to have implemented / ongoing for this if you do end up getting to a specific stage of development. I can speak on this a little bit just from a production standpoint. One of your best friends here is going to be a graphic. There is no better way to represent a timeline for something other than a graphic. And I definitely think showcasing the different stages of the timeline and showcasing specifically where your team is at is also going to be very effective at giving us a very clear picture of where your team is very confidently at, and also maybe showcasing and demonstrating where your team wants to be by the end of the project. And I think absolutely, there's a lot of core terminology here, such as like alpha, beta, release. I definitely think having a good grasp for these terms to understand where your team is at is going to help you in really strongly communicating where you're at. And if there is a specific stage of production where you think that you might get a little bit hung up on, or you think is going to take a little bit longer, that's totally okay, as long as you're showcasing what that entails. So what are all the different parts of this process? What is everything that you need to accomplish during this? And then figuring out how to, show that with little bullet points, possibly in a larger infographic, definitely is my recommendation for this slide, but I also want to toss it over to the other members here as well.
Yeah, I would just add that the litmus test for this is plausibility, right? So when we look at what you've done and what you're planning to do and the time that you say you're going to do it in, does it seem plausible? And we evaluate that based on what you've already done, and also the scope of what you plan to do. So just bear that in mind when you're doing this stuff. Yeah, don't put in 100 features in 2 weeks or something. Yeah, that's all I'd add.
Perfect. Then it looks like we don't have any questions, so we can keep moving right on along. The next part is going to be a little bit more in depth in our budgeting sheet, but we do just want to have a really brief overview of how you intend on using the $10,000 stipend. So part of that is going to be, obviously, we want the breakdown, the more logistical side of it on the spreadsheet. But if you're talking about for example, if you're talking about specifically looking for marginalized contractors, this would be a great place to talk about that. This is for all that little bit of information where, it can't be purely expressed by a number, and you want to give a little bit of context about what that number means on the spreadsheet. So this is the place to really, showcase where the funds are actually being allotted to, for what reason, kind of like the explaining process behind it. But yeah, Harry, I was going to ask you if there was any other recommendations for pairing this along with the budgeting sheet that would be really effective.
It's just high level, so it doesn't need a lot of detail here. Most of the money is always going to go on salaries, so don't be afraid of writing that. Remember to pay yourself, and if you're not paying yourself, you need a really good justification as to why, because that could be really off-putting to publishers from what I've learned. If you say, no, we can do it for free, it's fine. They don't like that. So yeah, be realistic, be fair, but don't worry too much about the details at this point.
Perfect. All right, then we can go ahead and move on to the last slide here. And this is obviously where we're going to find your game. So any information link about your team, any links to the games, any follow-up footage, trailers, all that good stuff that's actually about the prototype that you developed so far is an excellent place to tag in the slide. And I know that we didn't include it here, but I definitely would make sure to include any additional, contact info about your team here. We'll obviously get it in the type form itself, but just being able to have that here for reference and for making it feel like a complete pitch deck is something that I would recommend. Yeah, Harry, any insight here?
So speaking personally, I'm happy to play things that aren't like finished. You can always contextualize a prototype and say that we're working on these things, this bug is here, these are the controls, they're in a readme because they're not in the game yet. Ideally, you want a finished thing, but at this stage we can take all the caveats in. So I would rather play the real thing than see like a trailer that like brushes over a lot. I still think trailers are great and they can get you excited about the game conceptually, but I personally love playing them and I'm happy to play them broken. I don't know about the rest of you, but I don't mind.
Awesome.
I am muted. I was just
yeah.
going to add that this. Yeah, I was just going to add that is exactly what Harry said, because actually a playable build is part of the criteria. So it's part of the application. Like you must have a playable build, and then obviously they're not gonna. It's fine if they're not finished, if they're not actually like a demo, but like a prototype. But it's like we just want to know how aware you are. Of course, it's like if you add that there are bugs, there's things that you are aware that this needs to be changed, and so on. but you are working on it is very important also, because then we know that you understand, you know, the stage that the prototype is and what we would like and will be working on fixing and developing during the program. I think the reason why it has 2 links is that, of course, if you also have a gameplay video, that also can be very useful, like just like, you know, recording you playing, you know, parts of the game. This also can be very beneficial for the review and for the people reviewing the game.
Excellent. Yeah, no, definitely love that bit of insight. Then yeah, I want to, you know, give everybody here like a quick second to type any questions that they might have about the actual slide before we move on to the budgeting sheet, which I'll go ahead and pull up right now. But if we don't see any in a second, we'll obviously be able to jump right in. All right. Perfect. Then next up here, we've got a budgeting sheet. This is a little bit more of a technical doc. It is pretty intuitive when it comes to the actual way of, you know, adding the information in. So the key things that we, you know, want to make sure are covered are things such as the hourly rate. My screen is being a little bit weird. Sorry about that. Hours in each of the milestone per team. So, you know, what's realistic about the scope of it all. And, you know, being really grounded and being very conscientious of what you're actually saying takes what amount of time and the resources that you're going to need for that, as well as the cost of other items. For example, if you intend to have a marketing budget, if you intend on, you know, purchasing assets from anywhere, those are all obviously things that we want to see showcased. And, you know, this is the actual budgeting sheet itself. So, you know, you're going to have things such as the different milestones that are going to be sought out throughout the group, as well as, you know, the starting dates and the end dates of those. And, you know, it's all information, again, that we are going to be pretty, you know, it's going to be relatively intuitive when you're punching it all in. But I think the main thing that we want to make sure to talk about here on this panel is how it can come off as feasible and within scope. As well as, you know, being realistic, but also still being able to accomplish everything that we want to, you know, see in development throughout this, you know, throughout this course. So Harry, I wanted to quickly, you know, pitch it over to you about how to make this budgeting sheet make something that is realistic. How do you make it seem like it's in scope? How do you get us, you know, see this as something where you're actually using the money in a way where it's like, yeah, that makes sense.
Well, it's a bit of a dark art, budgeting. I don't think anyone actually knows how to do it properly until they've already done it. So I would probably caveat all of this by saying, like, in real game dev, like if you're a big studio with kind of loads of money, the actual cost like per worker to kind of make a game is a lot. It's almost like $10,000 a month, someone said to me, if you equate like utilities and rent and kind of do that on a per worker basis. So obviously we're not working with those numbers. My advice for doing it this way is just really thinking about, okay, is the rate reasonable? Like, does it seem like somebody could like actually work those hours at the expense of another job and still survive? That's probably litmus test 1. Then I'd be thinking about, okay, how many hours are they working for? Does that match up to what features they've said they've implemented? So, for example, if you have quite a large scope feature in your game, which is going to require some programming intensity, you know, I would expect to see the programmer have a lot of hours in relation to some of the others. So really the advice there is just make sure that when you're thinking about the features of your game, there's the kind of respective amount of work going into the match up. So if you have a game with a lot of art in it, or a lot of writing, then I would expect that to kind of be almost you'd be able to intuit it from this spreadsheet, right? Does that make sense? Just make sure where you're allocating resources kind of roughly correlates to the features that you say are most important to the game. In general, yeah, I don't do the budgets at Atlas Studios. It's like, make sure people have make sure the numbers seem reasonable for the hours you're working. Make sure the hours that you're working kind of match what features you say you're focusing on. Yeah, Segi, I am teaching a class in 5 minutes. I actually need to go.
Okay.
So thank you guys. But yes, hopefully see you all hello people in the future. See you all for Elevate. Thanks.
Thank you, Harry.
Thank
See you.
you,
Thanks.
Harry.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Yeah, I think I just was just gonna add what Harry was saying. It's just that when we say like to be, make sure that you are fair, if the rating is definitely like not fair by distributing equally in the whole team. It's just by being fair, by distributing equally to the amount of work that each person on the team may have. And I think Zagi might gonna go through more of here on the template, but this is a great template that you can go and change. And just think about it, this is actually a template. So it's like, we're not necessarily expecting you to use like the disciplines that's there. It's just like for you to think about it. So you might be able to change like that disciplines that are there. You might add more columns or remove some columns. I think the only thing here that it was very good, the Zagi added, is regarding the milestones, right, Zagi? Because I think those milestones are actually updated to the program. So it's for you to think about that those milestones dates are actually already updated and accurate to what we're going to expect or we're going to work on during the program. Another thing that I also thought about it is that, I know that some people have already like the send questions to us, the people that are applying. They already have like a pitch deck and things that they already actually approached some other like publishers before. And then of course they might have a budget that is related to the whole game. But this template here specific is for the 4 months or 15 weeks of this acceleration program. So that means that, the salary, the fee, it might change, but what we're looking for is just the allocation of this 10,000 SPN that you're going to be offered throughout this program. So just think about really these 15 weeks and not the development of the game as a whole. And I think it is also quite interesting because, of course, you're not going to have the game ready for launch after this program, right? You're just going to have the game ready for pitching. So, of course, there's a lot of costs come after that might be in your whole budget, but not here. So it's something to think about as well.
Exactly. Yeah, I think a few key things that we want to make sure that we've seen success in previous pitches and in previous budgeting sheets is incorporating things that might not initially be front of the production line. For example, it's obvious what art is, and it's obvious what programming is, and it's obvious that there's all these more larger nuanced areas where you can just add a budget that is mostly for salary as well as a few assets, and that is something that's completely reasonable, and that's probably where the majority of your budget is going to be. But the thing that we really like to see that's that extra little brush and touch is if there's a specific license for a program, and even just adding like an extra $100 charge to say that you are very conscientious that you're going to need this with the program, really showcases us that you've thought it really through. And this might not be something that comes up with every game. Sometimes you really just need the salaries to be able to develop the game and just get through those really important parts of production, and that's totally okay. But being a little bit more conscientious of being able to provide a little bit more of a breakdown can really showcase and give us the assurance that you are very confident about your scope, that you know what you're doing. And another thing that we also want to make sure is very important on these budgeting sheets is fairness. Fairness not only to yourself and paying yourself a fair wage, and being very conscientious about how to make sure that you are allocating money towards yourself and your team and your cause. But also, if you are bringing in contractors, we do want to make sure that they are also being paid, fairly. Some of the most impressive applications that we get are people that set very reasonable wages for any work that they are outsourcing. Just because one thing that we also like to obviously do as an org is we like to try and implement, positive change in the industry. And that means making sure that, if we are bringing in people of, marginalized backgrounds, that we're making sure that we're paying them, fair wages, and that we're getting them involved in ways that are non-exploitative. And that's obviously very, very difficult for, any sort of startup. Money is low, and it's very difficult to be able to know how to use it. But one thing that we strongly encourage, if you are able to add it, is being able to show that you are really paying fair wages, especially when it comes to working with, marginalized groups. So yeah, I think those are my key pieces of information. And would be able to provide us that extra confidence that you definitely have the amazing application that's worthy to, get ready to kick off the Elevate program. So yeah.
And can I just add one thing as well to that? I think this is based on Zach said as well. As we were mentioning, like the reason why there is a stipend for this program is that we do know that there are a lot of developers that, for instance, they have a day job to support, of course, their finances, but they are trying to work on a project. And then, of course, they're trying to pitch to publishers in order to gather that budget and income necessary for them to focus on the game. So, I mean, there's also like why now maybe your fee might vary because you might be working on something else. But the idea is that we need a stipend for this program to make sure that you are also working on your prototype over by the time that they're going to put into.
Sorry, I think we lost you for a little second there.
Yeah,
do you mind repeating the last two lines?
I don't know where you lost me, but I was just I'm gonna try to rewind a little bit. But yes, the idea is that we just have this stipend for this acceleration program to make sure that you and everyone in the project.
Oh no.
Yeah, looks like we lost you again. Eliana, so sorry about that. I
think that's also important to be working without get paid, even if it's during the program.
Awesome. I think we did lose you again, unfortunately. But what I can do, Eliana, if you want to go ahead and just send me a quick few bullet points about what you were summarizing, and I can go ahead and make sure to send that over to Lorda and Teresa. And again, so sorry about that. And I do want to be conscientious of our time. We are at the official end of our little panel here. And I did want to, quickly pitch it over to the audience to make sure that there's no last questions. And then we can go ahead and wrap this up.
I think my only last question is about the prototype and its readiness. Hopefully this is not a stupid question. You're saying that it's okay to have a completely gray box prototype that has very little art, but is functional and you can play it and get, like, is that okay?
Yeah. So I think the main thing that we really want to have showcased in this is the realistic scope of what you're trying to make, right? And, if we see on your budgeting sheet that, $8,000 is being allocated towards art, but you've got this amazing gray box backend that is like, almost bug free and you just are going to need to do some little touch ups here and there, then yeah, I think, I would feel confident looking at that and saying, they know what they need and they know what they need to get out of this program, right? And so I don't think that the prototype, the main thing that we're looking for is not for it to be a very, vertical slice, pitching to the studio. Like that's not what we're looking for with the prototype. What we are looking for is a good understanding of where your team is at, and that your team knows how to collaborate to be able to bring a project together, and then the in-depth knowledge of what that prototype is and how it can be developed over the course of the program. And those, I think, are the main things that we're really looking for in the prototype, is to get some, grounded understanding of your team and where you're conscientiously going with the goals of the program. So.
Excellent, thank you.
Awesome. Then I do think that Eliana was able to give an amazing summary of what she was saying. So make sure to go ahead and give that a little read if you have the chance. But yeah, other than that, I think that we're good to go ahead and wrap up. We are going to have this recorded. We're going to be able to make it accessible later on for anybody that is here in the audience or happens to come across it in the future as we're starting to wrap up applications. Again, thank you so much to the Wings team for taking their time to be able to stop by and support the amazing Codecovering community and give some insight. And we're also super excited to see your applications. Lord and Teresa, we're gonna have our eyes out on those applications for hopefully when they come along. So again, thank you everybody so much. And without further ado, I hope that you have a magical rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.